Now, a meeting called by the federal government to consider proposals by organized labor for a new minimum wage is holding at the moment in Abuja, that's Nigeria's capital. A letter from the Office of the Secretary to the government of the Federation dated April 24th and signed by a permanent secretary in the SGF's office said that, and I quote, "The purpose of the meeting is to deliberate and agree on government position on the new minimum wage, which will be presented at the next meeting of the tripartite committee." End quote. The two major labor unions, that's the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, had earlier made separate proposals for the new minimum wage based on what they called existing economic realities. Well, TUC had proposed a figure of 447,000 naira per month, while the NLC later adjusted its stance to request 794,000 naira per worker. Now, Arise News analyst Dayo Sobowale joins us now to discuss the quest for a new minimum wage for Nigerian workers. Good afternoon, Mr. Sobowale. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure being here as usual.
Right, let's get straight into it. So many numbers being thrown into the pot. You have also government have positioned themselves at 150,000 to 200,000 provisionally. Where do you think the numbers will land? I know this is almost asking like for you to pull a magic trick out of a hat, but where do you think the numbers are going to land after this meeting?
Yeah, so it's a good question. See, we have what I would call a harvest of minimum wages, from one end of the spectrum to the other, from over 700,000 to, okay, maybe 100,000. But you see, they will have to find a solution in between, one way or the other. And the sooner they do it, the better. Because time is not on this government side. You see, some people have, some observers, well-informed observers, I've said that if immediately after the removal of fuel subsidy, we had increased minimum wage, it would have doused the tension, economic tension, and sufferings in the economy. But then, it's never too late. But time is not on the side of government. You see, and if you ask, I think we discussed this some time ago, I think the proposal from Labour, which they said is realistic, I don't think it is realistic. They are making a mockery of government's failure to intervene in arresting the deterioration of the value of the naira versus the dollars. Because if you look at their calculations, it will be based on that, on an exchange rate of over 1,000. I don't want to acknowledge where it is ending. Get me? So if they do that sort of analysis, it cannot be realistic. They themselves know that government cannot afford it. Although I had suggested 200,000 sometime, and I think somewhere along the line, the president mentioned 200,000. That is affordable. So to me, that's a realistic takeoff or landmark. No, depending on how you look at it. But then, if you have the minimum wage, you know, if so facto, the cost of foodstuffs will rise, inflation will rise, purchasing power will diminish, and then at the end of the day, we are back to square one. You see, the solution to our problem is so simple. The refineries make them work. Let us sell our own products and earn money from from export, and buy things that we can use. Alternatively, we produce everything we want. Aside from the refinery thing is a major issue that will get us out of our mess, but it seems to be ignored. And deadlines are drifting from time to time, but yet none is still working. But it needs to be done if this government is serious about arresting inflation and paying the minimum wage. Because it's no use fixing the wage that state governments cannot pay. It's no use fixing a wage that private industries cannot pay. And then, you see, we have ignored two things. First, we have ignored our informal sector. Because Nigerians exist and thrive and live from hand to mouth on a daily basis. Some of them are not employed by a government. They are not members of the state union. And that's the formal economy. They may be denigrated by people say they don't pay taxes and all that, but they are all there. The street vendors, the drivers, the tailors, the vulcanizers, they make ends meet, and they are in their millions all over. They are not, see, they are looked down as a formal sector because they don't pay taxes and government help. But in other places and climes, they have incorporated them. Get me? Sorry, I mean, in Italy, they brought in prostitution and narcotics, and they put it as part, they contributed about a third to the GDP. It's high time we face our problem. You see, I am not happy. We go to the World Bank to borrow money, and we've been doing it for years. Even the World Bank there has given money to developing countries. It's now regretting that since almost 80 years now, since 1944, they are still using the same method. Inflation has not been defeated. Debts are rising. You get me? And they say all the fiscal buffers they put in place are not been able to cushion the effect of the austerity measures, of all the conditionalities which they have been using, you get me, to make the free market economy the dominant economy in the rest of the world. It is not working. But luckily for us, we have a mixed economy. The government is there. There are some industries that they are ruled, it's government monopoly. There are some that are a mixture of government. We should do that. And then, you see, increase the monitoring and rehabilitation of our informal sector before it becomes a target for those who want to foment trouble. Because if you see the rate at which they chase street hawkers, street traders, and street people, these people have to earn a living. Because by earning that living that they get above the poverty line, and they are not disgruntled enough to attack all of us. So that is it. So labor should be realistic. I wonder how they will defend the 700, 400,000 or something. If not, with the statistics they have from foreign exchange market. And how realistic is that? All they are trying to tell government is that you do not go to IMF conference and get foreign currency and get us more involved in debt, which when we convert, we know that we have nothing on the ground. Can't use that free market economy for foreign loans and then ignore what is on the ground there. So they are translating it into it, and it is not realistic. It is not economics. Okay. It's confrontational negotiation. That's how I see it.
Sobowale, you made a very important point about the informal sector being, relegated to the background because they don't pay taxes in this case, and I think that's definitely something that should be addressed. But one thing you also mentioned is that there's no point fixing a wage that states and the private sector cannot afford to pay. Yes. Now, when it comes to whatever figure is reached or arrived at the end of the day, would you also like to see movement or gestures towards ensuring compliance with whatever will be reached at the end of the day? Because we do know there are some states that are very complying with the current minimum payment of minimum wage as it stands.
You see, it's not a matter of popularity, it's a matter of affordability now. Okay. Affordability. You see, these states have so many priorities. Like we were talking about the education the other time, tertiary funding. There is fund there for states so that you don't have young people who are not going to school. But you see, they need to contribute something from their budget. They have other priorities. Education is not their priority. They won't do that. Now, if you make this minimum wage, some have not paid 30,000. And it's not, let's be honest with that. It's not as if they cannot afford. It's not, I don't want us to divert to other areas. It's not as if they cannot afford. But any government that does not prioritize social welfare, that does not prioritize health and education, I mean, this is objectives to be, reassessed again. But then, you are in a democracy, People should not vote in governments that do not care for their popular needs at election time. That's it. That is what responsive governance is all about, but it's very, very lacking. And you see the same set of people being returned to office now and then.
Yep.
And then the gap between the rich and poor is still there.
Even
It's
increasing.
widening.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
All right, Mr. Sobowale, thank you so much for taking us through this topic. I always appreciate your insight. One of these days, these people at World Bank and IMF will hear us.